For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. When people ask the question, what's the worst offense in NFL history? On paper, that should be a tough question. I mean, there have been over 100 seasons played, and we've seen roughly 2,500 unique seasons offensively for teams. It should be very hard to definitively say what the worst offense of all time is, because in theory, there should be a ton of bad options to choose from that you can debate. However, you know an offense is bad when almost immediately, when you think of the worst offenses of all time, one team comes to mind. That team? None other than this team right here, the 1977 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I could go on and on about how bad this Bucs offense was over the course of the season, so I'll just do that right here. In 1976, the Bucs, as an expansion team, scored just 125 points, or 8.9 points per game. That's bad, right? Well, their points per game average went down in 1977. It seems almost impossible that you can do worse than under 9 points per game, but the 1977 Bucs found a way, as in 1977, the Bucs averaged 7.4 points per game, scoring just 103 points across the entire season. And through the first 12 weeks of the season, Tampa Bay scored 53 points, or 4.4 points per game. They were so bad that midway through December, the Buccaneers literally would have increased their scoring average by kicking 2 field goals and not finding the end zone. Through the first 12 weeks of the season, the Buccaneers scored, I kid you not, 4 offensive touchdowns. It took until the final week of the season for the Bucs to score a touchdown in the first quarter. In terms of the major offensive stats, to the surprise of no one, the Bucs were dead last in all of them, ranking 28th out of 28 teams in points scored, offensive yards, first downs made, passing yards, passing touchdowns, yards per pass, rushing yards, and yards per carry. Other than that, their offense was great. At one point in the season, the Buccaneers played in 5 games, and they got shut out in 4 of them. And in a stat that seems insane to believe, if you were a Bucs season ticket holder, and you went to every single home game that the team played at Tampa Stadium, you did not see your team score a touchdown at home in person until December 18th. You had to wait until the literal final week of the season to see your team score one singular touchdown in person. I think I've hammered the point home enough, and will continue to do so throughout the course of this video when it's appropriate, but you get the idea. The 1977 Tampa Bay Buccaneers were absolutely historic and set bad milestone after bad milestone. However, one good milestone from the channel's perspective is that we are so close to hitting 60,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us reach that goal, and you want to learn more about the weird and wacky history of the NFL, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post, because we post every single day about NFL history, and crazy stories like the one you're about to hear. Thanks in advance for your support. And perhaps no moment summed up just how bad the Bucs offense was in 1977 than this game right here. A battle against Washington down at the Big Sombrero. Because this game was so bad that afterwards, Washington was literally telling Tampa how bad their offense was, and things they could do in order to improve it. And Bucs head coach John McKay refused to listen, as he was in outright denial that his offense was that bad. In his eyes, no one's going to talk crap about his offense, even though it was absolutely 100% warranted here, because Washington definitely had a point. And nearly half a century later, we're taking a deep dive into maybe the most embarrassing moment that happened for the 1977 Buccaneers on the offensive side of the ball, which is saying a lot considering how inept they were. Because this is the story behind the ugliest and the craziest moment of the 1977 Tampa Bay Buccaneers from an offensive perspective. Before I talk about the absolutely embarrassing moment that happened after the game, which truly highlighted Tampa Bay's offensive ineptitude, we need some context to understand, well, how the game was going in the first place. It's October 9th, 1977. It's week 4 of the NFL season, and as we're into the second quarter of the year, we've got an NFC battle on our hands down at the Big Sombrero between Tampa Bay and Washington. For Tampa, their nightmarish start to their franchise's history continues, as after going 0-14 the previous year, the Bucs find themselves sitting at an abysmal 0-3, being one of just 2 teams in the NFC to not have a win under their belt through 3 weeks. I'm not even going to pretend about how losing this game practically eliminates the thought of the Buccaneers making the playoffs in a 14-game season, because no one in their right mind thinks that this team can make the playoffs. Literally, your local Pee Wee football team had as much of a chance to make the playoffs in 1977 as the Buccaneers did. Tampa was just looking for its first win in franchise history, and even though the defense was playing quite well, only allowing 15 points per game so far, the offense was another issue, as through 3 games, the Buccaneers had scored 13 points, or barely over 4 points per game. The Bucs scored 3 points against the Eagles in week 1, 3 points against the Vikings in week 2, and 7 points against the Cowboys in week 3, which came on a defensive fumble return, so 0 points offensively. This meant that Tampa's offense had yet to find the end zone through 3 weeks, and on drives where they trotted out a quarterback, they scored 6 points, or 2 points per game. Maybe they could right the ship against Washington. Maybe they could show some signs of life offensively for the first time all season, and heck, maybe the first real time in franchise history. However, as you'll very clearly be able to tell from these highlights, that did not happen. In fact, somehow, this was their worst offensive performance of the season at the time, which is saying a lot, because when all was said and done, Tampa Bay lost to Washington by a final score of 10-0. The defense did its part. Washington was held without a point over the final 3 quarters of play, and the defense forced 3 turnovers. In 1977, Tampa's defense actually ranked in the top half of the NFL, which is impressive considering how often they were out on the field. I can't fault a defense that only allows 10 points, holds the team to 2.5 yards per carry, and holds the opposing quarterback to a 50% completion percentage and a passer rating of 50.2, especially when Washington started 8 drives in opposing territory. The offense, however, yikes, yikes, and yikes. It was so bad that, I kid you not, the first time that the Buccaneers got a first down was toward the end of the 3rd quarter. For the first 43 or so minutes of game time, the Buccaneers had yet to move the chains. Tampa turned it over 5 times, and combined, their quarterbacks got sacked 10 times, with Gary Huff getting sacked 7 times and Randy Hedberg getting sacked 3 times. Combined, between Huff and Hedberg, the 2 men combined to go 10 for 28 with 39 net passing yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a passer rating of 12.8, which is worse if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. The amount of drop passes and horrible throws and horrible protection is just mind-boggling, because it truly looked on a lot of these plays like a college team was playing an NFL team. That's how bad of a mismatch it was. And yes, the Bucs had one nice run during the game when Anthony Davis ran for 31 yards on 1 carry. But if you take that run out, the running game for Tampa was no better than their passing game, as without the 31-yard run, the Bucs had 25 carries for 66 yards, averaging 2.6 yards per carry. No matter what Tampa tried, they got absolutely nothing whatsoever going. And the crazy part about watching the Buccaneers play on this day isn't just how bad they looked offensively from an execution standpoint, but how bad they looked from a play calling standpoint, because some of these calls were atrocious. On one play, they had a 3rd and 8, and decided that the best way to get the first down was to run the football. It didn't work. On another sequence, They had 2nd and 16 and 3rd and 21. And both times, they decided to run the football. As if that was going to work. Heck, there was one sequence late in the 4th quarter down by 10 points, with under 5 minutes left, where they needed to push the ball down the field and get a quick score, preferably before the 2-minute warning. And they called a run up the gut on 1st down. I know it's tough to throw when you've got terrible blocking and terrible quarterback play and terrible receiving play, but running straight out of the I formation on 3rd and long isn't going to get it done, I can tell you that much. All I know is that when you finish a game with 136 total yards of offense, with a good chunk of those yards coming in the 4th quarter, it's not pretty whatsoever. And he looked quite poor on offense. And look, everyone with a brain knew that Tampa's offense was terrible. Everyone who had a working set of eyes could see how bad this offense right here was. Heck, even head coach John McKay said so, saying after the 10-0 defeat, the offense was terrible, and we lost. Pretty much sums it up. And speaking of people with a brain who knew that Tampa's offense was terrible, how about players on Washington? As in, players on the opposing team. Other teams had called out Tampa before, including Dallas and Minnesota earlier in the season, and Oakland the previous year in 1976 for being akin to a college team. But the Washington criticism was on another level. For example, linebacker Chris Hamburger said the offense was too repetitive, and that they would have to start diversifying their play selection to have any success. But the main person to call out Tampa's inefficiencies, that was none other than Washington defensive tackle Bill Brundage, the former 2nd-round pick who would be playing his 8th and final season in the NFL in 1977. Said Brundage on this offense, while praising the defense for their great play, sooner or later, John McKay has got to learn that his old University of Southern California offense, where he used to coach before taking the job in Tampa, won't work in this league. He's not playing Stanford now. Running from that I formation on 3rd and 10 makes no sense. I would say they've got to change before they'll get anything going offensively. But then, of course, who am I to say? I'm just a dumb player. You know what's bad when the opposing team is telling you, quite bluntly, you suck. Your play calls are terrible. Here's how you can get better. You know when the opposing team is literally giving you pointers after the game to be a better team? That it's not a good sign. It's not as though this hadn't happened before. Heck, Baltimore Ravens tight end Shannon Sharp did this to the rival Pittsburgh Steelers in 2000, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But it's crazy every time it happens. But what makes this one interesting is that one man was not happy with the comments made by Washington's players, and especially the comments made by Bill Brundage. That person, as you might have been able to guess, that was this man right here. None other than head coach John McKay, who called opposing players and the media idiots for saying that Tampa's offense was bad, even though it was objectively bad and had scored 13 points through 4 games. And again, 7 of those came on a defensive fumble return, so it's really 6 points. Because once McKay got wind of these comments, he took Brundage and the press to town, saying, "Anyone in his right mind who says it won't work is an idiot." What the hell does Bill Brundage know about football? Maybe this was where the Mel Kiper rant came from with the Indianapolis Colts. But I don't think saying that a veteran player knows nothing about football is the smartest move, especially when said veteran just shut you out. Still, McKay continued, saying that the Bucs didn't run the eye a ton, and the only person who thought that was Brundage, who probably doesn't even know the offensive set and couldn't care less. Spoiler alert, you did run from the eye a ton. We saw the footage. McKay even added, "I'm disappointed in the comments that I read, which are absolutely ridiculous," before saying that he didn't care about criticism being made, even though he seems to care a lot about criticism being made. Said McKay in a PG language, "I don't care whether the critics are anti-John McKay or not. The thing that bothers me are the silly comments that are made. I'm going to tell you people something and I want you to listen to me. None of you know anything about football. I don't know why people don't understand that you can't take 2 tight ends out, lose a starting guard, a starting tackle, and your best running back in Ricky Bell, and expect to move the football. But what was especially bizarre about these comments is that this feels like the smelly shoe example. There's something that says that if you walk into someone and that person smells really bad, then odds are they're the one that smells bad. However, if you walk into a bunch of different people over the course of the day and everyone smells bad, in all likelihood, it's not them. It's you. Hi, you're the problem, it's you. Everyone seemed to be telling McKay that this offense wasn't good, that this offense was predictable, and that the offense ran the ball way too much on obvious passing downs. And McKay, despite admitting that the offense was terrible after the game, bold says, "How dare you criticize us and say this won't work, even though it hasn't? And did you really expect an offense that's this makeshift to look good? Even though we sort of implied that by bashing the offense after Sunday's game? And even though the offense had never looked good under McKay throughout the entire season, and heck, all of franchise history? That doesn't seem to make any sort of sense now, does it? All Washington's players are saying is, we shut you out because you guys were way too predictable and lined up in some really stupid formations considering the circumstances. And considering how well Washington's defense played, getting 10 sacks, holding the quarterbacks to a combined passer rating around 12, and allowing 0 points, I think they're a pretty good source of credibility. And your response is, they know nothing about football, even though everyone is saying the same thing, and even though they literally play football for a living? Washington says you're too predictable, and your response after getting shut up by Washington is they don't know what they're talking about? And again, this wasn't the first time that a team said comments like this about Tampa. This was just the most prominent of these comments. If McKay didn't want to respond to these comments, alright, that's one thing. But for McKay to respond as if Washington was insulting and disrespecting the great Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense of 1977 is absolutely asinine. And it's going to come as no surprise when I say that after the game between these two teams behind me right here, shocker, Tampa's offense continued to struggle, and John McKay refused to adapt whatsoever. Tampa would lose its next 8 games after the Washington game, extending their losing streak to 26 games, 0-26 lifetime to start off. And there was a stretch where, again, they got shut out 4 times in 5 games, and they would get shut out besides the Washington game an additional 5 more times throughout the remainder of the season, including 1 game against the New York Giants in 1977, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And I have to stress this again. Tampa's defense in 1977 was, dare I say it, actually kind of good. Really, the defense was not bad in 77. It might be the most underrated defense in NFL history, considering the fact that I think a lot of people think that the Buccaneers in 1977 were this god-awful team in every facet of the game, when that's not true. The defense was pretty solid. Really, with a halfway competent offense, that defense was more than good enough to get that team into the playoffs, or at the very least, finish at or above 500. But that offense, oh man, that offense was rough. So just to recap what happened during this game right here. The Buccaneers entered the game playing like crap on offense, and they continued to play like crap, picking up no first downs through the first 3 quarters and getting shut out. Washington says after the game how Tampa Bay was insanely predictable and how they probably shouldn't run the ball so much in long yardage situations. And that irritates Tampa's head coach, who, despite criticizing the offense himself, says that the opposition has no idea what they're talking about and how they know nothing about football, even though they literally held them to 0 first downs through 3 quarters and no points. So clearly, they knew something. It's like in baseball if a pitcher gets lit up. The opposition comes out afterwards and says that the reason he got lit up is because we knew the signs. And we knew that he'd always start with a fastball up and in, and if it ever got to 2 strikes, he would throw a curveball down and out. So we knew what was coming. He was very predictable. And the pitcher responds by saying that they don't know what they're talking about. Just a strange situation all the way around. Because during this game in 1977, Tampa Bay's offense was so pathetic and so predictable that it even left Washington players saying on the Buccaneers, "What the buck?" Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.